are you? I'm so pleased and honored to have you here.
And I'm not playing anything I gave you. Okay? Scratched.
All right.
So I'll get up and say something after I play the first piece. It's definitely not what your brothers were.
Yeah. You do whatever you want.
Huh?
You do whatever you want.
Yeah. So, but it's not that. And I'll play something like that for
Yeah, I'll put this down here so you can just hit the mic button here until that turns green.
Turn it off when I'm done.
Deb, we're going to go by that clock. We're going to go by that clock, not our clock. We're going to go by that. Is Val ready? Are you ready? Excellent. And let us now settle into a spirit of worship, first with our prelude, which will not be "Will You Buy My Story?" It will be a great mystery. It is great that we have Deb Bono here this morning, and it is a mystery what she will provide for us for our prelude, but we know it will be great. You're also invited to light a silent candle with joy or sorrow at this time. It's going to be a good morning. It was a one-click chalice lighting. Our words this morning are from my friend and colleague, Reverend Scott Taylor. May the light we now kindle and the time we now share anchor us to that inner flame, that sacred center, which helps us remember who we were before the world told us who it wanted us to be. May our time together clear the way for those memories and voices and friends that lead us back home.
Good morning. You may have noticed I'm not your minister. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester, a congregation of love, hope, and justice, inspiring people to take on the challenges of a changing world. My name is Linda Morse, and I am your worship associate this morning. We begin by acknowledging that in Worcester, Massachusetts, we work, learn, live, and worship on the seized ancestral homeland of the Nipmuc people who survive and remain active as the Nipmuc Nation. We offer a special welcome to those of you who are new or visiting us for the first time this morning. We are delighted that you are here and hope that you will join us in Fellowship Hall following the service for refreshments and conversation. If you have questions or desire more information about this service or any of the ministries and programs of this congregation, please do not hesitate to ask. We invite you to fill out one of the cards found in pews. These cards can be placed in the offering plate or given to one of the ushers or greeters this morning. For those of you joining us online this morning, we offer you a very special welcome. For safety purposes and so that we might come to know you better as you are able, please place your name on your video feed. Please take a moment to sign one of the attendance clipboards that are now being circulated. Though you are not obligated to sign, we appreciate your information and will use it only for church purposes. I would also like to bring your attention to the sheet that was attached to your order of service. A week from yesterday, next Saturday, on the 4th, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America will be holding a meeting here at the church. I have indicated the website that you can reach to RSVP. And if you choose to attend the meeting virtually, you will be sent a Zoom link. I'm very passionate about these issues. Am I missing some of the welcome? I hope not. I guess I thought I had it all. But anyway, okay. Sorry, I should have read yours. Oh, yes. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to take up more of your time. During the service, we offer an opportunity to share a brief personal joy or sorrow. If you would like yours to be read aloud by the minister, please print it on an index card in the pew and drop it in the collection plate when it comes around. These cards will also be posted outside the minister's office to be shared with our friends at other services. For those online, you can place a joy or sorrow in the chat, and we will read and share it during this time in the service. In the foyer are listening devices and large print service programs and hymnals for those who may find their assistance beneficial. please see one of our ushers who will be pleased to help you. I invite you now to turn your technology to worship mode. And finally, please note the announcements on the back of your program. There will be a time for short verbal announcements following the postlude. We are so glad you are here and hope that this morning is an opportunity for rest, reflection, and rejuvenation.
Our opening words this morning are those of my colleague, Tim Haley. Amid all the noise in our lives, we take this moment to sit in silence. We give thanks for another day. Thanks for those in our lives who have brought us warmth and love. Thanks for the gift of life itself. We know we are on a pilgrimage here, but a brief moment in time. Let us open ourselves here, now, to the process of becoming more whole, of living more fully, of giving and forgiving more freely, of understanding more completely the meaning of our lives here on this earth. Would you please join together in our opening hymn this morning, number 108, found in your gray hymnals, My Life Flows On. And please rise in body or in spirit. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentations. I hear the real, both far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? Through the tempest now me roars, I feel the truth it liveth. What through the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. Whose storm can shake my inmost calm, while to the rock I'm clinging, since love prevails in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing when tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near? How can I keep from singing? The prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging, when friends by our shame are undefiled. How can I keep from singing? Please be seated. All of you, please arrive here at 9 a.m. next Sunday morning for choir practice. You know who you are. Want to invite Robin Mitskovich forward for our all-church read moment.
Good morning, everybody. I wanted to say that I am thrilled to announce that on the 31st, with the Side of Love Task Force, we're having a Zoom discussion about the books on our all-church read, which are Defunding Fear, Ruby on the Outside, and Visiting Day. If you're interested in attending, there is a link floating around on the emails and social media that you sign up to register, and we'll send you the Zoom link on Tuesday. And then on February 5th, we're going to be in the church here doing a service based on the themes of these books. And we're going to have a special coffee hour in the lounge after for discussion. From this book, Ruby on the Outside, which is about a middle school girl whose mother is incarcerated. I'm just going to read a little bit of it. Maybe one day in the future, my mom will come home and meet my new friend Marguerite in person. She could meet Marguerite's mom, and Marguerite's mom could bake those cookies, and my mom could see Lulu, and we'll be together, but it won't be soon. I know that now more than ever. When my mother is released from prison, I will be 31 years old. That's way too far outside my brain for me to handle right now. Right now, we are having this delicious feast. I love these cheeseburgers, just the three of us, and for now, it is as right as we can make it. This is a good book. So I'd like to invite our young ones with baskets to come and stand up and begin our Change for Change collection. If you have change you would like to give for the Emergency Ministers Fund, please raise your hand and you will be visited. Thank you.
You bring them forward to me. Excerpts from Two Gentlemen of Boston by Florida Ruffin Ridley. Usually the homeward journey from school was a dignified process. It was decidedly fitting that 13-year-old ranking scholars of the 8th grade graduating class should have occasion for serious conversation. The closing half hour of school devoted to the consideration of gems from history and literature always left Arthur and Morton in a contemplative mood and ready for serious debates on the lives and deeds of Napoleon and King Arthur and Marmion and all others. From my shaded seat on the porch, I could see them from time to time that they left the schoolyard, all the way up to the tree-bordered street. And as I watched the straight, manly little figures, I took delight in imagining the course of their absorbed conversation, and in observing the companionship which seemed to promise so much in the way of mutual benefit and pleasure. Today, however, the approach of the boys was decidedly out of form. It was not that there were attendants to the number of 8 or 10. Very often their debates were extended to include followers who gave more life and vigor to the scene, and the occasions of supplementing their points with side whacks and shrubbery and high leaps at curbs. I was used to this variation from the usual, but today the formation was entirely out of the ordinary. One striking feature being that the comrades walked apart and silent. The followers compact and in earnest conversation. As the groups drew near, I was startled by the sudden realization of what the scene meant. Without doubt, Morton the dilettante and Arthur the dreamer had disagreed, had gone so far in this disagreement as to fight, and had had a bloody fight at that. There was no sign of belligerency in their attitudes. They walked quietly and apart. Characteristically, Morton had restored his clothes to some order. His Norfolk jacket was tightly buttoned to hide the dust and the mud left on the blouse from its contact with the earth. But his scratched and bleeding knuckles couldn't be hidden in his efforts to cover a blackening eye with a very grim handkerchief. Arthur was frankly disheveled and seemed utterly indifferent to the fact that he was without hat or tie. His face carried some slight intensification of its inclination toward grimness, which for racial relations was never as readily discernible as upon his friend Morton. His lack of bruises and general bearing indicated quite clearly that he had been the victor in the fray. I was rather sorry that I had disclosed myself by an involuntary move toward the approaching group, for it at once became evident to me that Morton had intended to pass without stopping. What more natural? On seeing me, however, he stopped, and with the courtesy that was so charming and so marked in attitude, he tried to drag his cap from his disfigured head. "It's all right, Mrs. Allen," he said, "merely a little difference of opinion." And replacing his cap, he swung down the road alone, leaving me to recover before turning to those who were left, the poise which the approach and his speech had rather upset. I turned to my son, who was evidently suffering under the disadvantage of having a smooth talker get in his work first. "I'll fight anyone who attacks my good name," he volunteered, with great emphasis. And then, with the evident desires to level up intellectually into the eyes of the cortege, "He who steals my purse." Leahy began and stopped short, whether from some budding sense of good taste or from the realization that a hint to his meaning was all that was necessary to his followers. It wasn't clear. But he began to edge toward the screen door in silence. I had first hesitated at encouraging the close companionship between Arthur and Morton, which loomed inevitable. American standards of simplicity had been too strongly bred in me to accept wholeheartedly the polish with which Morton literally shone. Still, Arthur, with his inherited indifference to externals, could stand quite a little working upon, and I had not only realized the benefits that Morton would bring Arthur, but also those that Morton would receive. In fact, I felt sure Morton had the advantage. Morton was never, as Arthur, so absorbed in a book that he overlooked offering a chair when necessary. But I thought I worried the grieving over my young barbarian who would bring to the table, along with his immaculate young guest, a pair of hands that never should have left the cellar. Yet I could not but warm to the fact that he had forgotten himself in seeing his pets receive their daily attention on time. I was at the kitchen window, making out a batch of cookies that were great favorites with the young literati. Two classmates of the dueling pair were lying upon the grass beneath the window, and their voices came up to me. Art and Mort had a fight last week when you were absent. Gee, I never saw Mort get into a fight. Nah, he didn't want to this time, but Art made him. Who licked? Oh, Art. Did he make his nose bleed? Yes, and blackened his eye. Gee, I wish I had been there. And after a pause, what did they fight about? Well, with deliberation, Mort attacked Art's good name. I'd fight for my good name, wouldn't you? Mort tried to talk out of it, but all the fellows were on Art's side. Sure, I'd fight for my good name. Did he call him a liar? Worse than that, he went to the guild and he's had to report a good deed, and he said he had been elevating a little colored boy. Elevating a little colored boy. Geez, I wish I'd been there. Is that your dog? Come on. And the pair of legs went scurrying across the lawn. A little later, Morton came in with Arthur. We're leaving tonight, Mrs. Allen, and I came to bid you goodbye and wish you a very pleasant summer. And the little hand was extended with his usual grace. Our young Chesterfield sailed for Europe 3 days later, leaving more questions in my mind than before. What had been his reaction from the fight? In his relations with Arthur, how much had he been influenced by adults? What were the parents' reactions? Were they possibly those of the rebuffed missionaries who only feel pity that the heathen do not know what is good for them? As for my little son, I never discussed the matter with him. I felt he had shown himself wiser than I. With indistinct wisdom, he had sensed a situation in which I was blind and had met that situation adequately. Had I not recognized the patronizing poise, neither I would have had the directness and the courage to reduce it to its lowest terms and deal the knockout blow. More on this later. We come to that time in our service when we are given an opportunity to share that which is symbolic of our own efforts, an opportunity to continue to contribute that which is necessary for the vibrant ministry and mission of this congregation in so many forms. Not the least of which this week was the India Society of Worcester, the Bengali Society of Worcester, who was in our sanctuary and our fellowship hall. For those of you who go into fellowship hall, the smell is curry. It was so wonderful. And of course, when the minister of the church arrives, he must eat, which is in part why he arrives, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. But in the sanctuary, against a backdrop here, was the goddess Saraswati, the Hindu goddess of learning and music and wisdom. And in the afternoon, after a full meal, the community gathered not unlike we do when we go to Ferry Beach and we have our talent, no talent show. Only here it was all talent. Or so it would seem by the cheers of families who sat and watched their children dance and sing and play piano and other instruments, and then sang themselves and listened to music that reminded them of home as they recreated home in this place. And that to me is the wonderful news. I was so taken this week, and I'll talk more about this, as we were introduced to the video of the killing of Tyree Nielsen. And I went for a drive. I wanted to be in community, and I went looking to see if there was reaction in various parts of the city, and I found none, overtly at least at that time. Then I came to this church to check in. There was a 12-step meeting in the lounge, which was huge. There was an equally huge group of people in the sanctuary setting up for Saraswati Puja, and the Worcester Drum Circle was in Fellowship Hall. The place was jammed. There was one volunteer who was quietly trying to do her work on her computer in Robin's office in the midst of all of this. And I thought to myself, this is exactly what the world needs. It needs a community that opens itself to all of these experiences and welcomes them all at once, and creates more space when more space is needed. That is a miraculous healing vision in a world that seems so bruised and hurting and is often beset by violence. So I come to this time in our service, which is so rote, right? You know, you're supposed to reach into your pocket and pull out your checkbook, or reach into the pocket of the person in front of you and pull out their checkbook, right? But if you carry it one step further and realize that it is not the money, but it is the resource that continues to enliven the spirit of this place and continues to make space for so many other people, then our offering is more than an offering. So I invite you this morning to partake and to contribute to our offering, not just for the sake of this congregation, but for the sake of the community we love and the world we serve. The morning offering will now be received. And now we come to that time in our service when we're given pause to consider what is deepest in our hearts or most profoundly on our minds, or in the work of our hands, in the days that have transpired or in the prospect of days to come, joys and sorrows which touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because of our capacity to share them in the midst of a company that claims us as a co-journeyer. So I invite those of you who have joys or sorrows this day to form lines on either side of the sanctuary. This is where I do my flight attendant. Come and speak briefly into the microphone, first telling us who you are so that those using our auditory enhancement devices or who are with us online might also participate in this important ritual. And then to light a candle of joy or sorrow if you desire. And for those of you who are online, if you have a joy or sorrow that you would like to share, you're welcome to place it in the chat, preceded by the words, "Please read," so that we can find it quickly and include it in this important part of our service. Are there joys or sorrows to be shared this day?
So my name is Deb Bonneau, and yes, I'm not playing what's in the program, obviously. Excuse me. That was a show that I did with the children here at church maybe 10, 15 years ago. It's a wonderful, wonderful show. But I played this set of music about a month ago, January 1st, as a matter of fact, and I played it during Jen Innes's wonderful sermon. All 15 of us were here to hear that wonderful sermon. It was great. Very small turnout, which is expected. So when I was thinking about what to do today, I worked really hard on that set, and it was perfect on January 1st. It works today too, I think. This endless January is almost gone. And I just loved both these arrangements that I found that weave the two tunes of Simple Gifts and Auld Lang Syne together. So I'm treating you to that today. My final piece in the postlude will be Same Auld Lang Syne by Dan Fogelman. Anybody, Fogelman? Ever hear him? It's just a gem of a tune, and if you ever have a chance to find it with the words, because I'm playing to those words, obviously, you will enjoy it, I promise you. My other announcement is that in a couple of weeks, we won't be here. My husband, myself, my kids, extended family are all heading down south to Cartagena, Colombia. My son, who's already married because they did a civil ceremony, oh well, but they wanted to get it done early, very pragmatically to share insurances and all that kind of jazz. But we're heading down to there with my actually daughter-in-law, Allison Soltombrero, there we go. And it's going to be a big, big party. My son has friends coming down there, and Allison grew up in that part of the world, so it's going to be an adventure. Details to follow.
Hi, I'm Sue Nees, and I just want to extend my appreciation for the IHN volunteers. We had our host week a couple weeks ago, and you made my job so easy. I was a little panicked at the end, but that's okay. I just want to say thank you for volunteering, and if anybody else is interested in finding out about it, please see me. And we have two famous people now in the paper, John and Brian.
Hi, I'm Debbie Merrill, and my joy is yesterday morning I went to the breakfast for the Women's Social Circle, and I used to go all the time, and then I stopped, and I thought about why did I stop, and it is because I am constantly in a flurry of either catching up on work for school or planning for school, or feeling like I have to clean my house or something other than enjoying life. And yesterday I took, I don't know how many hours, but I came home so refreshed after having just a little bit of downtime with these amazing, smart, thoughtful women, and it did me the world of good. So thank you to Kim for organizing it and for the people who shared that time with me.
Morning, I'm Kim. To add to that, if you are a woman or identify as a woman and you want to know more about it, come see me, because we have a lot of extra things that we're doing now. It's not just morning social circle, we're now doing evening activities and weekend activities, and we just have so much going on that I can't even tell them everything here. But I've had a number of disappointments this year. It's been really rough for me, and so I need some joy, and I'm sharing that with you, that we are reinstituting game nights on the first Friday of the month. I'm hosting with Ken, and it's in the message, but it's not on your program, so I wanted to make sure everybody knew about it. So that is my joy, because that gives me a lot of happiness to play games and teach games, and it's going to be fun. So first Friday of the month here, starting in February. So that's why I'm telling you today, because it's next Friday and it's not in it. Bring games, bring food. There's a registration form if you want to order pizza. That's for a fee. Everything else is free. So please come join us.
And fellas, we have a lot of catching up to do in this congregation. Our women's social circle is now expanded beyond Saturday morning. I'm telling you that one Friday night a month is going to have to evolve into something.
Hello, my name is Paul, and I've got some good news. My brother's out of intensive care. Yay, okay. And the other thing I'd like to share is that good news is that there are more people seem to be showing up at this church. And I actually have a little bit of a request. One of the things, as in the hospital, things have been happening. If anybody here knows who can repair a boiler, because his stepdaughter is in a cold house and needs to get it repaired, see me so I can get a name and hopefully get it repaired. I'll even chip in some of it.
And another sorrow to offer. I spoke yesterday with Bruce Lachey about an hour after his mother died. He and his wife, our associate affiliated community minister, Cheryl Lachey, are in New York and will be there for a few more days. I want to thank the members of this congregation that have continued to surround the Lachey family and provide opportunities for them to be where they are and take care of things here at home with them. We look forward to their return, and obviously we'll continue to surround them with love and with much light. The other is that we heard this week that a friend of the congregation who's very much involved in our refugee ministry program, Barbara Petrotelli, also lost her father this past week. And so we offer Barbara and her family our sympathy and surround them as well. Beth Posner Waldron writes this morning, my joy is being here today surrounded by a loving community and having my grandson Rowan with me, who turns 11 today. So congratulations and happy birthday to Rowan. Let us be in the spirit of prayer and meditation. Oh, I'm sorry, online.
We have several online.
All right.
Corey Prashniak writes, please read, a sorrow that my beloved cat Danny is in the hospital with a serious condition, but a joy for every day we have with her. Jennifer Carey Robinson writes, please read, this past week in Detroit, my daughter's friend was a victim of gun violence. Please hold his family and friends in your hearts and send them peace and healing thoughts. Thank you. Laura Lenahan writes, my daughter Rain is sinking deeper and deeper into her depression and defeat. I'm doing everything she's allowing me to do. Maybe it would help if others reached out. If anyone wants her number, I'd be happy to give it out. I'm getting desperate. Thank you. Mara Pentlarge writes, my joy is how well the 8th Principle Workshop went last Sunday. 30 people listened to Paula Cole Jones tell us about the changes this church needs to make to become more diverse. Talk with one of the folks who was here to learn more. Sharon Hatstadt writes, I would like to wish my son, Sean Duvall, a very happy birthday. He gave me the gift of motherhood and the understanding of the miracle of birth. Kate Bejun writes, Matt Bejun's father, Ken, is in the hospital having suffered a heart attack yesterday. Ken has had a tough year with various ailments and multiple hospitalizations. Please pray for his recovery. And the last one, Diana Muja writes, I have a joy to share. I have a kind and talented sibling who has not been able to work for over 4 years due to depression and chronic illness. They started a new job this week and it's going well.
That let us enter into a spirit of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, source of our inner and outermost being, we come with gratitude in our hearts for those of our family and friends who continue to add so much meaning to our lives and to provide an immense amount of support during times of trouble as well as triumph. We extend ourselves into the lives of those family and friends who are in need of healing, who are in search of wholeness, who desire help in order to be able to traverse all that life has placed in their path. For those who grieve mightily this day, we offer sympathy, but more so, we offer a loving embrace and an understanding heart. For those who seek wholeness, we continue to offer the best of ourselves in order that they might be able to claim the best in theirs. For all of this, for all that continues to be and all that we wish would come into being, for all that is true, right, real, and good, we give great and abiding thanks. Amen, and blessed be. Like many of you, I have been stunned into various kinds of waves of feeling over the past few weeks and this week as we've witnessed a number of mass shootings. The death of Tyree Nichols during this first month of 2023. Just last week, the New York Times reported that by the start of the fourth week in January, the tally had grown to include at least 39 separate shootings in which 4 or more people were injured or killed, outlining a striking explosion of violence across a range of sites in nearly every corner of the nation that has killed at least 69 people, although the most current statistics I heard were 139. The deadliest shooting so far took place in Monterey Park, California, a city with a thriving Asian American community where a gunman killed 11 people and wounded 9 others inside a popular ballroom dance hall. The authorities said the gunman, who may have targeted his victims and who later killed himself, was a 72-year-old man. Then came another deadly mass shooting in California. A gunman who authorities said was a 66-year-old man killed 7 people and seriously wounded at least 1 other person in Half Moon Bay, south of San Francisco. What has captured my attention most have been the stories of those who were killed. The Los Angeles Times noted of some of those killed in Half Moon Bay, Marciano Martinez Jimenez had lived in Half Moon Bay for 25 years and was an active member of the Oaxacan community and a father figure to many who loved him. Yi Tao Bing was a family man and a thoughtful friend who possessed incredible expertise in mushrooms, especially white button, shiitake, and oyster mushroom production. Other stories talked about those who were killed who had gone out that evening for the love of dancing and who cherished the opportunity to celebrate the Lunar New Year with friends. The words of Tyree Nichols' mother were particularly devastating and poignant this week. That she had a physical response, that she felt the pain in her stomach before she knew what had happened to her son, realizing later that she was sharing the pain of his body as it was brutalized. Brought to mind the words of Nigerian author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie in her book Notes on Grief, which she wrote following the death of her beloved father. Grief is a cruel kind of education, she writes. You learn how ungentle mourning can be, how full of anger. You learn how glib condolences can feel. You learn how much grief is about language, the failure of language, and the grasping for language. Why are my sides so sore and achy? It's from crying, I'm told. I did not know that we cry with our muscles. The pain is not surprising, but its physicality is. My tongue unbearably bitter, as though I ate a loathed meal and forgot to clean my teeth. On my chest, a heavy, awful weight, and inside my body, a sensation of eternal dissolving. My heart, my actual physical heart, nothing figurative here, is running away from me, has become its own separate thing, beating too fast, its rhythms at odds with mine. This is an affliction not merely of the spirit, but of the body, of aches and lagging strength. The experiences of these past few weeks, not unlike the experiences that we've had many times before, but most notably because of the proximity of all of them, have been a confluence of a variety of narratives. And part of the struggle, and I'm thinking back to our 8th principle workshop last week here, part of the struggle of what it means to come into the 21st century is to unlearn the habit of claiming a single narrative. It is to become open to the fact that life and history are far more complex than any one of us ever experiences. And I know this from the work that I do with traumatized communities, because I teach my colleagues how to weather the storm after a trauma, when everyone is trying to vie for the allegiance of what happened to them as the truth. Isn't this what happened, Pastor? And pastors worth their salt learn to respond to that very poignant question with, that is exact, I believe you, and I believe that is exactly what happened to you. Not, That is exactly what happened to everyone. To be in the world these days is to learn the art of being able to sit with a myriad of narratives without having to choose the supremacy of any of them, but to understand that the supremacy of the experience lies between them all, and learning how to negotiate how that affects us in our confusion and in our grief, in our grasping for truth. I was thinking about this when we experienced in our own community the arrest of Christopher Ayala Melendez at the beer garden a number of months ago, or actually I think it was last year. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a police officer in Worcester, and we were talking about this, and he was saying he was so impressed with the way in which the internal investigations go in the police department and had great trust in them, and that others in the police department called others to account. And he talked about a scenario where one officer had been fired for using overtly racist language, and that this was really the ethic. And I said, if that is so, why did it take 3 months and the discovery of a video to counter the narrative that the officers that were present had supported? If that is so, why did no other officer who was present at that challenge the narrative the moment that it had been written? And there was silence. I think about that in terms of the experience of being exposed to the video of Tyree Nichols, and what the narrative would have been if that video did not exist. Another black man that had run from police and obviously had done something wrong, otherwise he wouldn't have run. And so the police had cause to be able to brutalize him because he obviously had done something terribly, terribly wrong, until we discover he didn't. And that his life was far more complex and far more beautiful than we would have been told in the narrative as it would have been shared with us had it not been for the video. Like the death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, as well as the beating of Rodney King. It seems like a lifetime ago, and yet it was just yesterday. 30 years yesterday. It's an era when visual storytelling is more the norm than the exception, and an era in which stories can be seen and heard in a nanosecond. It's clear that the challenge we face as a culture and a community is how to learn how truth requires that we experience more than one story, more than one perspective, more than one entity can control, more than one entity to control a narrative. I go back to the author Adichie in a 2009 TED Talk, because we don't just read anymore, we also listen and we watch in order to learn. She says in her TED Talk, it's impossible to talk about a single story without talking about power. There's a word, an Igbo word, that I think about whenever I think about power structures in the world, and it is Dikali. It's a noun that loosely translates to be greater than another. Like our economic and political world, stories too are defined by the principle of Dikali. How they are told, who tells them, when they're told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. Power, she says, is the ability not just to tell a story of another person, but to make it the definitive story of that person. The Palestinian poet Moed Barghouti writes that if we want to dispossess a people, the simplest way to do it is to tell their story. And to start with, secondly, start the story with the arrows of the Native Americans and not with the arrival of the British, and you have an entirely different story. Start the story with the failure of the African state and not with the colonial creation of the African state, and you have an entirely different story. And so now you perhaps understand why the reading this morning from Florida Yates Ruffin Ridley was included in today's service. Not the least of which is that your minister gets a kick out of trying to read publicly 19th century literature. But today marks her birth date in 1861. She was born in Boston, Massachusetts. She was the second African-American teacher in Boston public schools. She and her husband lived in Brookline and joined the Second Unitarian Church. She founded the Society of Descendants of early New England Negroes, as well as a plethora of women's clubs, as well as founding and serving with the League of Women for Community Service. She was an ardent defender of suffrage. She was also a noted author of both fiction and nonfiction, concentrating her writing on African-American life and race relations in New England. Her account of her son's fight with his friend demonstrates the complexity of race relations, even among children, who are perhaps most susceptible to and bravely challenge, both susceptible to and bravely challenge the narratives which vie for supremacy in our culture. Which is why I think it's so very important to expose our youth to a wide range of narratives and perspectives. I'm particularly grateful at this time to our religious exploration team for encouraging us as a community to explore this very theme in our all-church read this year. And I look forward to next Sunday's experience with all of you. In many ways, when I read Ridley's story, I hearkened back to the words of Cornel West, one of my favorite theologians and public prophets of this era, as far as I'm concerned. He wrote in one of his first books, Race Matters, "For liberals, Black people are to be included and integrated into our society and culture, while for conservatives, they are to be well-behaved and worthy of acceptance by our way of life." Both liberals and conservatives fail to see that the presence and predicaments of Black people are neither additions to nor defections from American life, but rather constitutive elements of that life. It is something worth remembering as we listen to the various narratives that are spun in our communities about the violence that exists. To continue this theme, I want to return to the words of the author Adichie, who in the same talk that I quoted a moment ago recalls her arrival in the United States to attend university, an experience which she ponders in part, saying, "When I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States, I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked me if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She had assumed I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this," she says, "she had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me as an African was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. She continues, after I had spent some years in the United States as an African, I began to understand my roommate's response to me. If I had not grown up in Nigeria, and if all I knew about Africa was from popular images, I too would think that Africa was a place of beautiful landscapes, beautiful animals, and incomprehensible people, fighting senseless wars, dying of poverty and AIDS, unwilling to speak for themselves, and waiting to be saved by a kind white foreigner. Then she notes, this single story of Africa ultimately comes, I think, from Western literature. Now here is a quote from the writing of a London merchant called John Locke, who sailed to West Africa in 1561 and kept a fascinating account of his voyage. After referring to Black Africans as beasts who have no houses, he writes, they are also people without heads, having their mouth and eyes in their breasts. And so I began to realize, says Adichie, that my American roommate must have throughout her life seen and heard different versions of this single story. Later in that same talk, Adichie says, now what if my roommate had known about my friend Fuma Onda, a fearless woman who hosts a TV show in Lagos and is determined to tell the stories of what we prefer to forget? What if my roommate knew about the heart procedure that was performed in Lagos Hospital last week? What if my roommate knew about contemporary Nigerian music, talented people singing in English and Pidgin and Igbo and Yoruba and Idu, mixing influences from Jay-Z to Fela to Bob Marley and their grandfathers? What if my roommate knew about the female lawyer who recently went to court in Nigeria to challenge the ridiculous law that required women to get their husband's consent before renewing their passports? What if my roommate knew about Nollywood, full of innovative people making films despite great technical odds? Films so popular that they realize that they really are the best example of Nigerians consuming what they produce. What if my roommate knew about my wonderfully ambitious hair braider who has just started her own business selling hair extensions? Or about the millions of other Nigerians who start businesses and sometimes fail, but continue to nurse ambition? What if? Ironically, it occurs to me that the most popular time for the mixing of multiple narratives in our country is at funerals. We've had more than our fair share of them of recent in the last few years, but it is one of those contexts in which, when every aspect of someone's life is invited into the same place and those people begin to tell stories, people walk out saying more often than not, I never knew. I wish I had known. I wonder now about my experience because I didn't know. And as a minister, I sit there shaking my head going, why in the hell does it take our death for us to be exposed to the richness of our lives? What if? What if we created a community where we didn't have to wait until we died to be able to express how we fully live? What if we created a space where people could merge all of those narratives in a way that enriched us instead of depriving us of truth about how complex most of us are? I had that experience a few months back when there was an online debate on Facebook about the Columbus statue out in front of Union Station, and one of my friends who is a public servant here in Worcester was going on and on about this, and I said, maybe this is about more than just woke culture. Maybe this is about people who feel deeply about the way in which their culture has been marginalized. And what came back to me was, you're just one of them. And my response at the time, and it took me a moment, I took a breath. I may have actually taken 24 hours, which I strongly recommend when you're involved in some kind of very heated thing on social media. I wish we could go back to that time when we wrote the letter, put it in the mailbox, and had 24 hours in which to pull it out of the mailbox and tear it up before it got to the post office, but that is not the case. And so we have to discipline ourselves to actually pause between writing and sending what we write. And what I finally wrote back was, I believe that you are far more complicated and have a far richer story than the one that I'm experiencing right now in this thread. And I would ask you to consider me the same way. That instead of personalizing this and now talking about me as a human being, maybe we ought to talk about the perspectives and the stories behind those perspectives. And his response was astonishing. He wrote back and he said, absolutely. But part of what it took was for me to say to him, I know you are far more complicated than this. I know you have far more in you than this particular experience we're having, and I want to honor that. Will you honor that in me? At funerals, this experience comes full force, and we have this range of experiences from families who want to tell the entire truth about one's living, and others who recognize the habit that we have as a culture of defining a person's life by how they died, and who stay away from concentrating on what happened around the death in order to be able to concentrate on the life itself. And both are right in their own way, given the different contexts in which people live. And so part of what it means to listen to and to soak up and to live with multiple narratives is to understand why people tell the stories they do and what it is they're trying to reflect about the integrity of the life that has been lived. I just wish we would do it before we die. The author Adichie writes, "It does not matter whether I want to be changed because I am changed. A new voice is pushing itself out of my writing, full of the closeness I feel to death. The awareness of my own mortality, so finely threaded and so acute, a new urgency, an impermanence in the air. I must write everything now, because who knows how long I have." I would close with one of my favorite poems that I think speaks to Adichie's sensitivity. The words of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. "Tell me not in mournful numbers. Life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real. Life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, and dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Art is long, time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad battlefield, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living presence, heart within and God o'erhead. Lives of great ones all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints in the sands of time." footprints that perhaps another sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing. Learn to labor, and then to wait. Amen, and blessed be. Would you please join together in our closing hymn, number 345, found in your gray hymnals. What's, oh, the litany, I'm sorry, wait a minute. I apologize. I forgot the litany, which is, like I said, the order of service is just a suggestion, but I think the litany is important. The words of John Fox. Think about this in terms of the narratives that we've been talking about. When someone deeply listens to you, in the place where you wrote your first poem, it is as if gold had been discovered. Your bare feet are on the earth. Please rise in body or in spirit and join together in the singing of number 345. With joy we claim the growing light. With joy we claim the growing light, advancing thought and widening view, the larger freedom, clearer sight, which from the old unfold the new. With wider view come loftier goal, with fuller light, more good to see, with freedom truer, self-control, with knowledge deeper, reverence be. The words of my colleague Karen Anderson. May we dare to live from the center of our being. May we make our choices before others' choices makes us. May the fire that burns in our belly light our way. And may that personal commitment to our own individual rights make the world shine anew. Amen. And blessed be. Please be seated. Are there any short announcements from anyone in the congregation? Yes. Don't forget your Girl Scout cookies. It'll be in this week's newsletter as well. Go ahead. Yes, it'll be in the message. So just to reiterate for those online, there's a winter sewing workshop the Garden On team is putting on next Sunday after church at 1 p.m. And then on Saturday, February 11th at 1 p.m., there will be another workshop on how to do winter sowing that will include milk jug gardening. You must drink the milk first, and then you can garden. Just saying. Okay, good. Anyone else? Nancy. That's right. Come eat with the minister, not eat the minister. Next Wednesday noon, we'll have Carol Howe there with her wonderful scrapbooks, and we look forward to seeing everyone. There is Lessons with Loss this afternoon at 3 p.m. here in the lounge, and then 7 p.m. there will be Beyond Inquirers online. You can both find ways of connecting with both of those in our newsletter or on our website as well. The one at 3 is in person, the one this evening at 7 is online. So once again, worship in this place has come to an end, but our service continues next with fellowship and refreshments. May yours be a wondrous and wonderful week.